Zuckuss is a Star Wars character that is surprisingly unknown. Now, you probably haven't even heard of Zuckuss, but if you clicked on this video, you might have. Zuckuss is one of the bounty hunters that Darth Vader hired, and yet is surprisingly unknown compared to the others. You probably know the other ones. There's Boba Fett. You probably know that one, obviously, but there's also Dengar, Bosk, IG-88, 4-LOM or 4-LOM. I'm going to call him 4-LOM in this video. If it makes you mad, I'm sorry. But Zuckuss is quite an unknown one of these bunch. Might have actually forgotten one, but oh well. Anyway, he's a very unknown character in Star Wars, so I'm going to tell you a lot about him today, because I know a lot about him. Don't ask why, but... So yeah, I'm just going to tell you a lot about Zuckuss today. So we're going to talk about the story first, and then talk about stuff that's just in real life, more of. So if that's not your kind of thing, then you can click off the video once that happens. And if you don't want to hear the story, which is kind of weird, then you can just skip to that part. I'll probably put the time in after the video is done, so yeah. Anyway, let's get on to the story first, unless you're going to skip it. And it's quite a fun one, so let's get into it, shall we? Zuckuss was first born on the planet Gand, which is a very big gas planet. It was home to the insectoid species, also called Gand. One of these insectoids was Zuckuss. Now, the insectoid species of Gand that lived on Gand were very used to the gas. They could not actually survive with the air, so because of this, none of them had ever traveled off this planet, but Zuckuss decided he would. So, he made his own ship, the Mist Hunter, and then flew off. That's why he's wearing a gas mask in all of the pictures. He is having that so that the toxic air, to him at least, will not get into his body as much, and he can have the gases. Kind of strange, but whatever. Zuckuss decided that he would become a bounty hunter and hunt down other people. You may think that he was a very bad bounty hunter, as you've probably never heard of him until this video. But he was actually an extremely good tracker. Now, you might be confused why, but actually, Zuckuss had Force sensibility. Not the Force, but he could sense people from very far away. In an Imperial test later on, they said that he had no Force, but according to the Star Wars mythology and stuff, he does have the Force sensibility. Not the actual Force, just Force sensibility, but still, very helpful for him to track down. Another thing that he has is schizophrenia, so he always talks about himself in the third person, saying, Zuckuss will do something instead of I will do something. This is another part of Zuckuss, which is a very cool character trait. Zuckuss actually has lots of character traits that go very unnoticed, as the only part that he's in one of the movies, he doesn't say a word. But, anyway, let's talk more about the actual bounty hunting now. On one of Zuckuss's bounty hunting trips, he met a protocol droid named 4-LOM. Now, protocol droids are usually considered weak, mainly because of C-3PO, who is very weak. But 4-LOM is actually a very strong protocol droid that you probably actually heard of. When 4-LOM and Zuckuss met up, they were both on the same bounty hunting job, but this bounty hunting job would prove to be extremely difficult. So, 4-LOM and Zuckuss teamed up to do the battle, and ended up making a dynamic duo and sticking around with each other. They used Zuckuss's ship, the Mist Hunter, as it was much larger and could provide for them. Also, Zuckuss's ship had very high, fumes and gases in it, but because 4-LOM was a protocol droid, he would not experience any of these gases, which could be harmful for humans. Now, after this, they became quite a pair, defeating many bounty hunting jobs. Zuckuss and 4-LOM became such a good pair that they caught the eye of the Imperial fleet and even Darth Vader. Now, you probably already know this, but Darth Vader hired a bunch of bounty hunters to try and find Solo, Princess Leia, and some other rebels that were on the Millennium Falcon. Now, there was actually a whole comic about this, several, which is where I actually get most of this information, from comics and stuff. At least that's where most of it comes from. I got it from online. But all of these bounty hunters were trying to find them. And it was a very competitive scene, as they would be making a heck of a lot of money for this. At one point, Boba Fett would actually capture Han Solo. You probably already knew this, but was getting stopped by quite a lot of bounty hunters, including Zuckuss and 4-LOM, who had actually partly blown up his ship. Now, Boba Fett is probably the greatest bounty hunter of all time, at least in Star Wars. Some would argue it's one of the others, like Cad Bane or the Mandalorian, but it is actually Boba Fett, mainly due to a Star Wars Lego book that I have. Now, Boba Fett is the greatest bounty hunter of all time, and while Zuckuss and 4-LOM are pretty good, they're not the best. So, they were beaten by Boba Fett. Boba Fett basically killed Zuckuss, don't worry, he didn't die, and took 4-LOM's head. Now, Zuckuss fell off a cliff, but was actually okay. He survived. He was a little injured, but he did survive. But it was very lonely, so he had to look back on his memories, and he had to find 4-LOM. Now, Boba Fett had stolen 4-LOM's head to look into some information, because 4-LOM's a protocol droid, and just threw his head away. It just threw away. So Zuckuss had to find that, but 4-LOM turned against Zuckuss, and they had a pretty big battle. Now, eventually, Zuckuss did actually beat 4-LOM, but after this, he had to reprogram 4-LOM. It was a whole thing, and they stopped being a bounty hunting duo, which is kind of sad, but also a pretty good way to end Zuckuss' story in Star Wars. Now, there was actually another part of Zuckuss' story, but I didn't actually know much about it, at all, so I didn't include it in this video. If you guys do want me to research that, I'll include it in the video, but, yeah, that's basically it for Zuckuss' story, but we still have more Zuckuss stuff to get into, so let's get into that. In 1980, Star Wars released its second movie, The Empire Strikes Back, which included bounty hunters. Now, Boba Fett is the only bounty hunter that actually does stuff, and even he doesn't do much, but it would be weird if they hired just one bounty hunter, so Darth Vader hired multiple, for the script at least. That's what happened. But here's something strange. Zuckuss and 4-LOM's names were actually swapped. Originally, Zuckuss' name was actually 4-LOM, and 4-LOM's name was actually Zuckuss. Now, I think these names that are now that we have are actually better, because having Zuckuss be a robot and having 4-LOM as an actual living, breathing creature is kind of strange. So I think I like the new ones more. But how did this even happen? Well, Kenner released some toys. When they released a lot of Star Wars action figures, but when they released the 4-LOM and Zuckuss ones, they kind of mixed it up and got the names wrong. But ever since then, people just stuck with it, because they never actually said the names of the characters in the movies. So everyone just kind of stuck with it, and now it's common culture. Well, not really that common, because no one really knows about these two, especially Zuckuss, but whatever. It's still a common thing. In 1999, George Lucas started rolling out the prequel Star Wars movies. The first one was The Phantom Menace. Now, these movies are a topic for another day, but there was also Lego Star Wars Lego sets, I said Lego twice, that came out this year to celebrate. Now, these were mainly focused on some, basic things, but the next year, they would get a little more advanced, including Han Solo and Chewbacca and Princess Leia for the first time. Surprising that it took them a whole year to do that. Now, in 2003 or 2002, Boba Fett was introduced. How surprising. It took them only a couple years, which is kind of surprising because he does nothing. But afterwards, they made Lego Star Wars, the video game, then Lego Star Wars, the original trilogy, and finally, Lego Star Wars, the complete saga. I have a whole video about Lego Star Wars, actually, so if you want to watch that, you should check it out. But anyway, about Zuckuss. Now, in Lego Star Wars, the complete saga, they included all the bounty hunters. Now, the only one that was actually in Lego form at the time was Boba Fett, so they had to get a little creative. For Dengar, they just gave him a ninja mask. He's probably my least favorite of them. IG-88 was a bit more advanced, and Bosk and Forlom had their own custom head modes. But you may be thinking, wait, I forgot Zuckuss. No, I didn't. They forgot Zuckuss. He is so unknown that he wasn't even in the game. And there was no actual Zuckuss Lego minifigures. It took them over 20 years. I'm just kidding. It didn't take them over 20 years. It took them exactly 20 years because for the 20th anniversary of Lego Star Wars, they produced some 20th anniversary sets. This had nothing to do with Zuckuss, but in the Slave 1 Lego set, this is probably the last time they actually said, like, Slave 1 on a Lego set, by the way, so that's kind of cool. But in it, there was finally Zuckuss. Forlom had been produced in 2014, but Zuckuss took another 5 years, but finally came out, and now sells for over $50, or maybe it's a bit less than that. I actually have one because I got the set, so I'm cool. But yeah, that's Lego Zuckuss. That I talked about that longer than I thought I would, but we're still not done. So let's get into some more things that I think you'll actually probably care about. Alright, we're now on to action figures. I'm guessing you probably care more about these than Legos, but I don't know. Maybe you really like Legos like me. Anyway, the original Zuckuss action figure came out around 1988. I already shared about the original one with the name change and all. I don't remember if I actually showed the date, but yeah, it was around 1988, along with the Forlom. But after this, there wasn't really much Zuckuss action figures, but eventually there was another action Zuckuss figure. There was actually another, which is actually very high quality. I actually once was drawing Zuckuss, and I thought this was just a photo, but no, it was an action figure, but very high quality figure. If you care at all about Zuckuss and like action figures, I would suggest this. It looks very nice. But that's really all I have to say about action figures. There's not really that much stuff about them. But there's still one more thing about Zuckuss in the real world that I want to share with you today. So let's get into that final thing. Don't worry though, it'll be very short. Funko Pops. That's the final topic for today. Yes, there is a Zuckuss Funko Pop. You may not care about Funko Pops at all, but you may also really like Funko Pops. But there is a Zuckuss Funko Pop that I own. But there's actually 2 Zuckuss Funko Pops. One of them is special edition with a random wall behind it. Very cool. It's part of the Bounty Hunters collection. But yes, there is 2 Zuckuss Funko Pops. I have nothing more to say about the Zuckuss Funko Pops. Just that there is 2 Zuckuss Funko Pops. Let that sink in, that there is 2 Zuckuss Funko Pops. You were probably very confused about this. But unfortunately, folks, that is all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something about Zuckuss. And if you do want to learn more about Zuckuss, then I suggest you research him yourself, as I covered a lot about him, but there's still a lot more Zuckuss information that I have not talked about today. But, yeah, that's all for this video. May the 4th be with you, unless for some reason this video gets copyright claimed, and I will see you in the next one, unless I don't. Goodbye.